السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. We continue inshallah ta'ala with the book الدروس المهمة لعامة الأمة, the important lessons for the entire ummah of the Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام, the basics of matters of ilm that needs to be learned, and it's an obligation upon every Muslim to know it. And we're still in the pillars of Al-Iman, and we talked about the belief in Allah and the angels and the books and the messengers, and what is left is the belief in the Al-Yawm Al-Akhir, the last day, the day of resurrection, and Al-Qadr, وتؤمن بالقدر خيره وشره. Al-Yawm Al-Akhir, or the last day, the details of that in the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ are so many. And that's why there is, of course, always a level of studying or learning, and that's, can take a long time. And we'll be brief, inshallah ta'ala, even though there are certain matters that we need to be observed, many things to be talked about the Day of Judgment, because of the importance of it. And everybody shall return to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it's, when we read the Quran, when we look at what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said about the day of Al-Qiyamah, and the details of that, this is something that we should be, always our hearts are attached to this. But briefly, when we talk about the Day of Judgment, or the last day, it includes specific points. And these points, everyone has so many different evidences. It includes the talk about even the signs of the Day of Judgment. So this is a subject that we only should follow what is authentic from the Prophet ﷺ. The moment of death is the first stage of the Day of Judgment. So this is something also that there are ayat of the Quran, hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, that talks about death and right after death. Adhab al-Qabr or Na'im al-Qabr, the punishment in the grave or the delight of the grave. And that includes the questioning of the angels. And then the grave is either Rawdah min Riyad al-Jannah, a garden of Jannah, or Hufra, or a pit of the hellfire. And it's all according to one's actions in this life. And that's a huge subject with evidences in the Quran and in the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. After that is the resurrection, al-Ba'ath, to the act of resurrection itself. And the different status of the people at the time of resurrection, according to their iman, the believers versus the disbelievers, and the obedient slaves to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala versus the sinners, and how they are going to be gathered and taken to the place of al-mahshar, the place of gathering. So Ard al-Hashr, and the characteristics of the land of al-Hashr, and the affairs of people again there, waiting for the judgment from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The ahwal of Yawm al-Qiyamah, the horrors of the day of al-Qiyamah, is something that is clearly stated in the Quran and in the Sunnah of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. يا أيها الناس اتقوا ربكم إن زلزلة الساعة شيء عظيم. That, O mankind, fear your Lord, because indeed the shaking of the hour is a great thing, and the ayat talks about this. When the Hashr itself is something, it's with all the different actions of the people. There is the subject of a shafa'ah, when people would stand for long in the day of Al-Qiyamah, in the Hashr, waiting for the judgment. So they would go to one messenger after the other to seek intercession. Not to enter Jannah, just seek an intercession for the reckoning and the judgment to start. And that's the major shafa'ah, or shafa'ah al-uzma, for the Prophet ﷺ, where he intercedes for humanity, for them, for the judgment to occur. And this is where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala comes, and the angels, as it's stated in the Quran, to judge among the people, which is the subject of al-hisab wal-jaza, the reckoning and the recompense. This is something that is stated in the Quran and in the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ in many places. And the witnesses and people will be, every single person will be treated with justice of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or the mercy of Allah. And there are people will have witnesses, and every person will have witnesses, whether it's for him or against him. So 50,000 years long is the day of judgment. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَتَرَى كُلَّ أُمَّةٍ جَاثِيَةٍ. You would find every nation جاثية, on its knees. كُلُّ أُمَّةٍ تُدْعَى إِلَى كِتَابِهَا. Every nation will be called to its book. اليوم تجزون ما كنتم تعملون. On that day you will be recompensed of what you used to do. So everyone will be asked, and even the kuffar, are they going to be asked, or are they going to be commanded to go to the hellfire? Some said that they don't get reckoning because they're taken to the hellfire. What is more correct is that they are going to be reckoned, and they're going to be asked, and their actions will be even weighed, as some of the ayat of the Quran that talks about this. فأما من ثقلت موازينه فهو في عيشة راضية وأما من خفت موازينه فأمه هاوية وما أدراك ما هي نار حامية. So it talks about the balance of the deeds, which is one of the things that's going to be in the day of judgment. So and that's why the reckoning, or the hisab, or the wazn, and there's the weighing the actions of the people, and everything will be of value. Even the smallest act of good deed and the smallest act of evil actions, and it's the perfect justice of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Nobody will be missed anything. فَالْيَوْمَ لَا تُظْلَمُ نَفْسٌ شَيْئًا. On that day, no soul will be treated with any injustice whatsoever. And there's so many different principles in this. Everybody will carry their own sins. وَلَا تَزِرُ وَزِرَةٌ وِزْرَ أُخْرَى. No one will carry the sin of others. Everyone will bear their own sins, and also the good deeds. And people, they related to one another, meaning in action. Some people will be leaders of evil versus leader of goodness, and that's why the actions of those who they followed them will be also in their balance of good deeds or bad deeds. And there is the books. So all of this in the Ard of al-Mahshar, when the books of the deeds will be given to the people. اقرأ كتابك كفى بنفسك اليوم عليك حسيبا. Read your book. Sufficient is for you to, on that day, to be held accountable. The book, إن كنا نستنسخ ما كنتم تعملون, that we used to record everything that you used to do. And the disbelievers or the criminals would say, as we see that in Surah Al-Kahf, every day of Jumu'ah we read, ووضع الكتاب فترى المجرمين مشفقين مما فيه. That you would see the mujrimin, the criminals, مشفقين. الإشفاق is to have regret and sorrow and fear all together because of what's in the book. ويقولون يا ويلتنا ما لهذا الكتاب لا يغادر صغيرة ولا كبيرة إلا أحصاها. They would say, woe to us, what's the matter with this book? Does not leave a small or a major thing unless it includes it. ووجدوا ما عملوا حاضرا and they would find what they've done حاضرا present. وَلَا يَظْلِمُ رَبُّكَ أَحَدًا, and your Lord does not treat anyone with injustice. How things are treated in the Day of Judgment, the good deeds versus the bad deeds. The good deeds are multiplied, the bad deed is only one. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the most forgiver. Those who associate partners with Allah, there is no forgiveness. For the believers, there are forgiveness from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There is even exchanging the bad deeds with good deeds. And witnesses will be established against nations, against disbelievers. The Ummah of the Prophet ﷺ will witness against the nations before. Those who denied the messengers, ﷺ, the Ummah of the Prophet ﷺ would witness that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent the messengers ﷺ. So how the believers are treated versus the disbelievers, and the different delights even in the Day of Judgment. And this is many ayat and hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. What's the first thing that a person will be asked about in the Day of Judgment? The different types of hisab, the different types of reckoning that will be in the Day of Judgment. So much details, of course. And the questioning and people going back and forth with one to the other, disbelievers cursing one another, things like this, and presenting the deeds of the people. And it's amazing how many texts and how much wahy is mentioned about the Day of Judgment, as if it's something that we see every day. So if we go through all of the details of what's mentioned about the Day of Judgment, it takes a long time, because that's the entire book of Allah and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ in so many different subjects. Because this is the day where the justice of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will be seen, and the vast mercy of Allah that nobody can comprehend. And the judgment between the people among one another, the rights of the human beings, the killings, the corruption, the oppression, the slightest thing ever. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, again, as we said, no injustice will prevail whatsoever. The smallest harm that a person afflicted upon others, all of that will be brought to the justice of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Even the animals, they will be resurrected for them to get even and justice between one another. So that means there's actions of injustice among the animals, yes. And the Prophet ﷺ, when he passed by two goats, they were fighting with one another with their horns. And the Prophet ﷺ, he said to Abu Dharr, هل تدري فيما تنطحان? Do you know why they're fighting with each other with their horns like this? He said, I don't know. So the Prophet ﷺ, he said, ولكن الله يدري وسيقضي بينهما. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows, and he will judge between them because of that. And that's why when they're resurrected and they will be judged with one another, as the Prophet ﷺ said in the hadith, that يقاد للشاة الجلحاء من الشاة القرناء. The shah that did not have horns, it will get its rights, or even with the one that had horns, and it hurted it as a result of that. And then after that, they will all be turned to dust. And this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in Surah An-Naba. When the disbelievers would say, يا ليتني كنت ترابا, the disbeliever would say, I wish I was dust, after he sees the animals all returned to dust. Because there's no reward for them or punishment. It's just for the justice of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the ultimate justice of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to be established in the Day of Judgment after this life. And even this ultimate justice is even when the believers, they leave that stage and they're going towards Jannah. Right before Jannah, they will be held by a qantara, or like a bridge between the Jannah and the hellfire, and they will be purified from mazalim, from some wrong doings between one another, before they are allowed to enter Jannah. till when they are completely purified, then they will be able to enter the Jannah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As we talked about, also one of the things of the Day of Judgment is Al-Mizan and the details of the Mizan. That doesn't leave anything. Everything will be weighed on the actions, the books, the human being, everyone will, and فَمَنْ ثَقُلَتْ مَوَازِينُهُ فَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْمُفْلِحُونَ. Whoever his balance of his good deeds outweighs the balance of the bad deeds, he will be among the successful ones versus the opposite. So it shows the importance of one action, not to belittle the smallest actions whatsoever. A person might be in need of one hasana to make the balance of his good deeds outweighs the balance of the bad deeds, and to repent to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from all sins. Al-Hawd is also one of the things in the Day of Judgment where the Prophet ﷺ will be given Al-Hawd, or the basin, or the place where the water is given from the river of Al-Kawthar. That the water of it is whiter than milk and it's sweeter than honey, and the smell of it is much better than the musk. And the Prophet ﷺ will be there waiting for his ummah, giving them drinks, and whoever drinks from it, he would never be thirsty afterwards. And that's again in the Hashr, in the Day of Hashr. And some people will be pushed away because they changed after the Prophet ﷺ, as the Prophet ﷺ said. And the Salat, and how people would fall from the Salat into the hellfire. And then after that is either Jannah or the hellfire. And the Jannah is the everlasting place. Whoever enters Jannah, he's not going to leave it whatsoever. But for the hellfire, for the disbelievers, they would never leave it. And for the believers, if they enter the hellfire, they will be there for some time, and then eventually they will enter the Jannah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it's and the ayat of the Quran that talks about Jannah, and the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, and the different details of that, and even passing by the hellfire over the salat for the believers, and this is all admonition to the hearts. And that's why one of the the books of the Day of Judgment, Kitab al-Tadhkirah, the reminder of Imam al-Qurtubi rahimahullah, his way of the book is tafakkar al-an, think now, right? What's going to happen to you when you're crossing the salat? Think now, when you are resurrected and you see this and you see that. The entire book is like this. It takes you as if you are now watching and seeing what's happening in the Day of Judgment, for us to have that admonition of the heart and the purification of the heart as a result of knowing the Day of Judgment. Again, the purpose of this book is to go briefly mentioning the titles of things, in which that becomes guideline for us to explain it and to be upon it in so much details. And we talked about many of these things in details, and we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept from all of us. But it's something that has to be always revisited, from the matters of aqidah, from the matters of admonishing our hearts and purifying our hearts, because that's what keeps the hearts alive and purified, to belittle what needs to be belittled, which is this entire world and whatever it contains, and to exalt and to value what needs to be valued, which is the everlasting life, and to make all of our actions and all of our speech and everything that we do is only for the sake of Allah, seeking rewards from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. And we wish that we, subhanAllah, all of our gatherings, all of our talk, it's about the Day of Judgment. This is the majalis of the A'imma of the Deen, the Sahaba radiallahu anhum. To said majalis al-A'imma, as we talked about that before, majalis Imam Ahmad, is Imam Abi Dawood, Sahib al-Sunan, the owner of the Sunan Abi Dawood, he said, كان مجالس Ahmad. He was one of the students of Imam Ahmad. The majalis, the gatherings of Imam Ahmad, كانت مجالس الآخرة. It was nothing but majalis al-akhirah. The matter of the hereafter is discussed. It's not just what we said, because anything in the deen is about the Day of Judgment. It's about the hereafter. Even majalis al-fiqh, when we talk about fiqh and rules of how to make salah, how to make purification, transactions, all of that is to make sure that our actions are accepted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for the rewards to be given to the believers, and to be warned against the sins and disobeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So, and to be warned against these majalis or these gatherings, there's so much ghafla and forgetfulness, does not remind us of the Day of Judgment. To run away from this. Does that make life miserable? No, it makes us have even more enjoyment of this life. And to be patient for whatever time we spend on the face of earth. It's not, this is not the place to fulfill the ultimate desires of oneself. To enjoy, yes, but the ultimate desire is to be fulfilled in the Day of Judgment. Unfortunately, the way that we are raised, or we raise our children, or the entire life, is about how much fun are we going to have on the face of earth. As one of the statements of Umar radiallahu anhu, and it's some had questioned the authenticity of it or so, but that he said, the meaning of which, ما أبالي على أي حال أصبحت. I don't really care of what state I am in the morning or in a particular day. على ما أحب أو على ما أكره. Whether it's something that I like or whether it's something that I don't like. Of course, we always ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for al-afiyah, to have strength in all of our affairs, and to be always having a good, the goodness of this life and the goodness of the hereafter. But he's saying that to something that is a life changing, right? That this life is a life of trial, and you see how the issues, like for example the earthquakes and the like of this, in just a split of a second, one's life can completely change. And this is how a believer should be always prepared, thinking that we were going to live on the face of earth forever. Where did we get that from? I mean, everybody knows, but we have to act upon what we know. So we would say, I don't really care of what my status is when I wake up in the morning, whether it's something that I like or whether it's something that I don't like. Many things we do when we don't like, but we have to do it. And he says, because I don't know what's al-khayr, وَذَلِكَ لِأَنِّي لَا أَدْرِ الْخَيْرِ فِيمَا أُحِبُّ أَوْ فِيمَا أَكْرَهُ. I don't know whether the goodness is in what I like or what I hate or I dislike. Right? And many times what you dislike is what's good for you. Like you go to exam. Nobody likes to be in an exam just as an exam. It's not the ultimate thing. Is you do it for something else. But you would do something. You would study. You would spend time studying. You would spend time working. All of these things because you want to be upon something that you like. So the same thing with being obedient to Allah, with being steadfast upon the deen of Allah. And part of that is that what carries the person to be upon goodness is to always think and read about the Day of Judgment and the details of that. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept, and we'll stop here inshallah, and we'll continue next time inshallah. Sallallahu alaihi wa sallam wa Muhammad wa sahbihi wa sallam. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.